Henri is born in New Brunswick of Haitian parents. Henri Pardot is a Quebecois director, screenwriter, actor, editor, and creator producer. His 12 years of experience following his graduation from the l'Institut National de l'Image et du Son have enabled him to tackle ambitious projects, including feature fiction films, shorts, and documentary series. With MATV, a partner of Quebecois, he developed much needed content to help promote Montreal entrepreneurs. It is with the Black Wealth Matters documentary series that Henri has managed to capitalize on all of his many entrepreneurial talents. He recently completed the one-off documentary Afro Prosperity for Radio Canada, and he consistently promotes businessmen and women, researchers, activists, entrepreneurs, artists by drawing attention to the techniques that they use to boost prosperity within the Black community in Montreal, in the Montreal region. So we're very excited to have both of these great folks with us tonight, and I'll bring Justin up and hand it over to him. And we have Henri live behind me, and I'll wave to you over there since that's where you'll be seeing me from. And I will hand this off to Justin to take it away. Thank you so much to both of you for joining us.
Thank you, everybody. Hello, Henri. Thank you,
Hey, Justin.
for coming this evening, being here. It's huge honor of myself to be here. Thank you to the Guelph Film Festival, my family at Guelph Black Heritage Society. These opportunities to connect with the community and just have these discussions, I think, are always important and a great time. So thank you to everybody for being here. Yeah. Hello, Henri.
Hey, man, how you doing?
Nice to meet you in kind of person.
That's right. We'll make it work. We'll make it work.
Yes, we will definitely. So without further ado, I will actually I'll hold this here, get things started and ask a couple questions here. I really enjoyed the film. I hope everybody else enjoyed the film. I was blessed with the opportunity to watch it prior to this. And I watched it quite a few times. I'm not gonna lie. It's I found a huge connection right off the bat with it. And yeah, I just thought it was super important. So yeah. So my first question is, as a lifelong student of film, I can appreciate all the work that goes into making a film, emotionally, physically. It creates so many emotions, and I personally have never heard of Little Burgundy at all, and I felt I had to watch it more and more because there's so much to learn and understand and things like that. My first question is, do you think it's important that these stories about decline and sometimes the destruction of these Black communities should be taught in more places like schools?
Yeah. A lot of my projects, I say I say about a lot of my projects that this shouldn't be my job. This should be the schooling system and our different instances that take care of schooling and education. But definitely, we need to tell these stories. Little Burgundy story and a lot of Black community stories are about erasure, and this has been going on for 400 years. It's that that number again, but we keep on being erased from history. So filmmakers like I or others really have to go get on board and tell these stories. They're really important to us. They really, there's a lot of, yes, emotion, but experience that we can really get inspired by.
That's great. Thank you. I guess my second question is, now in the film, David mentioned that without the support from the community towards certain organizations, that the decline is inevitable. So do you think that the responsibility of the community, it's the responsibility of the community leaders to keep that support going strong, or the entire community as a whole to help support those organizations?
It's definitely the entire community. I mean, I think community members in Little Burgundy and elsewhere, maybe Africville or whatever neighborhood in Canada, the leaders have always been there. They're there. They take care of just the general well-being of each of its members, and especially they built institutions that are sometimes long lasting, like in the film the NCC was there for about 100 years. Union United Church is still there, celebrating right now their 115th, if I'm not mistaken, anniversary. So these people are really working hard. Now, we live in this thing, right, called Canada, and we pay our taxes, right? And we've shaped this country also. And this recognition is really important also. And I think that people in power have to also contribute to these small communities that are that are making Canada Canada, right? So everybody's extremely responsible. So they're responsible for the stuff that doesn't go well, but they're also responsible for the future. They have to get involved, and we need them. It's not just about us. It's the us, the collective us, that is really important. Because I know people from Little Burgundy, they've been working their ass off, you know, and a lot of them have 2, 3, 4 jobs. When I got into this project, I got into the committee to revive the NCC, and everybody that was on it was doing like another chore. You know, it's like they have many jobs and responsibilities, and they don't necessarily have the political or economic influence to get things done, to get that building revived. So it's important that everybody chips in.
Yeah, I guess just to add on to that, I definitely agree. I think that um that's the part of being in the community. Like I said, whether you identify with going to this church or this community center, I think if something happens, whether it be any sort of violence or any sort of bad things happening to this space, I think it's very important that as a community we all gather together to take part, to put an end to that or help out, with whatever may be needed, just because we're all here. As we've seen in some of those photos, there wasn't just Black kids at the NCC. There wasn't just one race, it seemed like everybody could go there. So I definitely think it's important as a community that we can all contribute. Sure.
Yeah, and also let's say like as a Black community, we take care of the white community, you know, like our aunts or mothers or sisters are nurses, or we work in the healthcare system a lot, and we take care of their kids, of their elderly. So we expect the same thing. It'd be just the normal thing to do. So this is why also, you know, we often talk about systemic racism, and we think about certain big things like police brutality, and we do have to talk about that for sure. But there are small things also that make things difficult, you know, financing. And Little Burgundy is full of halfway houses, or just stuff that keep people poor. You know, there's not that investment to take care of that neighborhood from the city.
Yeah, that's a shame too.
Yeah.
I guess it's a good segue into my next question. In the film, Charlene spoke of these villains in the neighborhood that would harass the community when they swore oaths to protect them. How important do you think it is to have representation in roles like law enforcement?
It's really important, but it is a problem. It is a problem. First of all, if we would have representation in the police force, and also the fire department, also, it just makes that people that know the neighborhoods, know the culture, can basically have a positive influence on those forces, right? So that is more possible. Now, regarding firemen, because I did ask David that, he is a captain of the fire department, and I was wondering, you know, what's the ratio? Are we very present? And it's hard, you know, it's hard to get involved in the fire department because usually the firemen are people that have access to cars, have access to a garage, they build things, they deconstruct things, and we're stuck in the hood where we're not necessarily owners our own destiny, of our buildings and stuff like that, where kids can just toy around and learn to be adequate with their hands and go after that in the fire department. So there's probably a link to be made also with the police department. I mean, they don't need to tour around in their garage, of course, but that has to be more accessible to us, and I think that would make a real difference.
That's great. Thank you. So my next question actually is another thing that we were talking about, or Charlene was mentioning, but she was saying that we as Black people are conditioned to tolerate more. And by doing that, we keep a lot in. These things in the long run ultimately affect our health in forms of cancers and other illnesses. Another reason is the quality of food that's available in some of these small urban communities. So do you think that food sovereignty is something that people in small urban communities or everywhere should take or should be exploring more seriously?
Yeah, that's part of the racism that's really inside urban planning. You know, there's this great book called Displacing Blackness by Ted Rutland. He's a professor here at Concordia in Montreal. And he really dives into the Halifax situation where Native people and Black people for hundreds of years now have been slowly displaced within an urban setting. And most of the time they wind up near storage facilities or dumps, or where there are a lot of electric lines, or everything that is really aside. And when they're in a space where there is all of a sudden more value to the property, they're really excluded. And this is what's going on also with Little Burgundy. They're really being squeezed out. That being said, in these neighborhoods, the parameter to not be a food desert is 500 meters. And that happens a lot. You know, there's a huge market near the water. It's called Atwater Market, but the prices are so high. It's really for that part of the town that can afford that, right? But inside the neighborhood, it's really a desert. There's no, if you're just living there 500 meters around you, there's no place to just stock up on food. So there are people like Jesse in the documentary that have this whole notion of gardening inside, right? So there are these initiatives, once again, from the community, from these citizens that try to change stuff and try to get healthy vegetables grown right from your kitchen table, you know? So that's one of the solutions, but that's very micro, you know, it's a micro solution. So definitely there should be a look in how to change these types of neighborhoods so everybody has access to food, you know, it's food. We've got kids, we've got homes and moms and dads. We got to take care of them with good food.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think another part of that would be also helping teach more people about gardening. I personally didn't garden much growing up. I was outside a lot, but you know, as an adult now, I'm surprised at how much I love being in the garden and how much I really appreciate just growing my own stuff and harvesting my own things. It's not easy work, but there's so much rewards to that. Another person I came across was the Gangster Gardener, and I have Masterclass. I don't know if anybody's ever subscribed to Masterclass, but the gentleman on there kind of teaches people how to grow out of anything. He's from, I believe, South Central LA, so it talks about how there is no gardens, there isn't really good green grass, you know, there's a lot of concrete and, you know, empty lots and things like that, but he shows you that you can use anything from shoes to drawers to whatever to grow these things. And I think that is a very important thing that also probably should be taught more, and or at least explored more for a younger generation and even an older generation too.
Yes, definitely. And that's why community centers are really important to communities like this. Like 100 years ago, the NCC and the Church Union United did all that. You know, they really educated in taking care of one's family and oneself also. But you take away these, or you take them away, or in a passive aggressive way, you stop financing them or you displace them, then that falls apart. And then they just point the finger and say, well, they can't take care of themselves. No, they haven't taken care of themselves. It's just they can't fight bulldozers that will just ram a highway through the neighborhood.
Oh, absolutely. All right, great. I'll move on to the next question. So there's so many themes in this film that I believe you did an excellent job of exploring, from police brutality, segregation, racism, community displacement, community support. But the most vivid one for me was that mirage of the post-racism in Canada. I've personally been on the receiving end of that racism, even here in this city myself. Um, and even when people are quick to say, racism doesn't happen in Canada, or, they don't see it very often, I'm definitely quick to remind them that they're just misinformed, because it happens all the time, every day. My question is, was the decision to film in black and white your way to visually blur those lines between the past and present?
Yeah, that's exactly it. That's exactly it. It's unfortunate. It's a story that keeps on repeating itself. There's a cycle in that neighborhood and other neighborhoods. And I was really surprised, because I was under the impression also, when I learned about Jackie Robinson coming to town, about this famous quote from a reporter saying, this is the first time we see a white mob running after a black man to celebrate him and not to lynch him. That was 1946. That was in the paper, man. So when you hear that, when you're a Montrealer and you're like, this happened. So what happened? Why did it change? And then you dig in more and you find out that no, nothing changed, man. It's pretty much the same, Viola Desmond was well in Halifax, but things are happening that are very specific to Canada and ahead of the States sometimes. Viola Desmond was before. Oh, I'm sorry. I have I can't remember her name, but the woman on the bus with the American civil rights movement. Well, I forget her name. I'm so sorry.
Rosa Parks?
Yeah, Rosa Parks. Thank you. And same thing for Mr. Christie in 36, who went to court to defend himself because he just wanted to have a beer at the Forum where the Canadians play. And he was kicked out because it was a black man, and he went to court, to Superior Court, and he lost, right? So these things sort of made segregation all of a sudden real in Canada. And this was way before Jackie Robinson, right? Was 10 years before, in 36. So these things still happen. And yes, I use the black and white to sort of like mesh past and present together with the archives to show that it's all that same story that's been rewritten, but still at the same time sort of erased because nobody knows about it.
No, I think that's super very genius and something to admire. I lived in Peterborough, Ontario for a short stint of time, and if anybody's ever been to Peterborough, beautiful community. I've heard it's like the sister city of Guelph, actually. Wonderful community there, but there's also a big presence of racism and skinheads. And even when I worked there, I worked for the Community and Race Relations Committee. And I remember at the time they were fighting to have a bylaw removed in the city that basically said, once it became dark, anybody of Black and Indigenous background had to leave Peterborough City. You had to basically cross the bridge and go over to I can't remember the name of the little thing, but basically you had to cross the bridge. You weren't allowed to be in the city. And it was a weird bylaw, and I almost couldn't believe that it was real, but they couldn't, when they went to court, they couldn't have it erased. It was so old that they basically said, we have to leave it. And I thought that was completely ridiculous, but weird things like that no one would know or think of,
Yeah.
So yeah, very, very.
It's very scary to hear stories like that. And there are thousands in Canada. Canada is not the States. It's not exactly the same thing. I say as a joke, but it ends up being true. It's sort of like polite racism, but it's still racism.
Yeah, I agree with that. I
it's
sometimes say I
still
joke that I
mass in
prefer the real stuff. You know, I prefer the honest in your
yeah.
face as opposed to being smiling and pretending behind your back.
Yeah. And we live in a province right now where we re-elected La CAQ, Coalition Avenir Québec, which is a political party. So same prime minister, and he denies that there's any systemic racism in the province. You know, he says this is not our problem. It's either Canada's problems or the state's problem, but there's none of that here. And they have a majority government, right? So it's very scary when we try to change things, when we try to raise our kids, when we do not want to have that famous talk with our boys to not trust the cops, to just make it home. It's scary stuff. And a man just got arrested last week because he was trying to open his car. This happened last week, you know, so there's still some problem with the police department and with the officials in this province and the city.
Absolutely. At this time, I would like to open up the floor if anybody had any questions, maybe for Henri, or about the film. Perfect.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask, at one point you were talking about the displacement and that 70% of the buildings were raised. And I cannot help but wonder, how does Little Burgundy exist as a Black community still? Do you give credit to the church, to the NCC? How did they manage to come back after the majority of their homes were decimated? I'm scratching my head.
Yeah. Well, I've scratched my head for about 3 years as I was doing this film. It's very surprising. So let me clarify certain things about Little Burgundy. First of all, it isn't uniquely a Black neighborhood. It is the neighborhood where 90% of Black people at the beginning of the 20th century lived. That's the place they could only live, right? There was sort of this gentleman's agreement where you weren't accepted anywhere else. So this was near the train station, where the hotels, where Westmount is, really rich neighborhood, where there work. So that's where they were, but alongside Finns, Francophones, Irish people, and all that. So the landlords didn't necessarily take care of their properties. So along the decades, the quality of the structure sort of like dwindled, right? It sort of like went badly, and the infrastructures of the city was really bad. So when they decided to tear off, I'd say 10% of the neighborhood for the highway, at the same time they had this plan to just redo and just destroy everything. So yeah, a lot of the community just went away. So what happens when you displace Francophones, they'll go to another Francophone neighborhood. Same thing for the Irish, for the Jews. But for Black people, that was the only neighborhood, right? So the only thing holding the community together was the NCC and the Union United Church. So even though people were displaced, they would still come back either on Sundays or every day to do their activities because it was home. You know, you always come back home. So the actual residents diminished, but the people kept coming back. Now, when the building disappears, this is where we are right now. It's been about 15 years, I think, that the building is gone, and it's so fragile, and the community is just getting older and older. But there's still that spirit, though. Like I walk around the neighborhood, and there's a hole. There's actually rubble right now. I mean, you see in the film, and you still feel the NCC. You still feel the spirit of it all. That's still there. It's really remarkable.
Thank you. Can I follow up with what are the chances of the NCC being rebuilt?
Um, it's hard for me to be objective. I have a lot of hope that it will be rebuilt. There's still the Citizens Committee that is working hard to pull funds together, to pull resources together to get it done. The lot is still there. It's still in zoned cultural and religious zoning, so they can just build condos on it, and they'd love to. But they're still working hard on it. It's a hard thing to do.
I think we'll have to leave it there tonight, but if there's any last words from either Justin or Henri, that would be amazing.
I was just going to quickly ask you what's next, if you could quickly let us know, if you know.
Yeah, sure. You mean my projects, or you mean the neighborhood?
Yeah, everything. What's next for you in general? Projects, life, the weekend?
I've directed and co-produced a documentary series called Afro Canada. So this time it's the whole country. It's 400 years. It's on the Radio Canada website. It's called Afro Canada, and I'm also working on a feature called Carnaval. It's closer to home this time. It's about my family coming to this strange planet called Canada and trying to adapt while remaining true to who we are. So I'm working on those types of projects. I love my culture and us, and I just try to tell our stories as best as I can.
That's pretty amazing. Definitely inspiring. I guess that's it. I want to thank you very much for being here with us this evening. Thank you again, Guelph Film Festival, Guelph Black Heritage Society for hosting this. Thank you everybody for being here and listening to us. And
Yeah, I wanna thank everybody also in the audience. I can't see you, but I can feel you, and I want to thank the festival also to take in my film and to put it up there. It's not about me, honestly. It's really about the people of Little Burgundy and Black people of Montreal. So it's our way to remember them and to keep the eraser from continuing. So thanks a lot.
thank you.
Thank you so much, Henri, and we look forward to seeing your next one and hopefully having that one as well. So thank you
All
both.
right.
Yes, and thank you, Justin.
Thank you. Take care.
Thanks. All right.
Okay. Thanks, Justin. Take care.
Thank you. Have a good weekend.